In 2012, the introduction of 3D technology tried to revolutionize the entertainment market with immersive content ranging from video games to movies and even home TVs. Maybe the technology wasn't mature enough, maybe the content wasn't always spot on, and having to wear glasses or headset made the whole thing fade away like a flash in the pan. But now, Samsung is bringing us new auto-stereoscopic technology, reviving something we had written off too soon. If you don't want to deal with glasses but still don't want to give up on 3D, then you are in the right video. The Odyssey 3D is a 4K gaming monitor with up to a 165Hz refresh rate. It uses a flat IPS panel, which by itself isn't exactly exciting, even though several benchmarks report that color coverage and accuracy are well above average. Contrast, blacks, local dimming, and HDR might leave you a bit disappointed because there is nothing particularly special there. The monitor supports all latest AMD and Nvidia adaptive sync technologies, and response time ranges from 1 millisecond to 9 milliseconds depending on the mode. According to benchmarks from RThings, which is a reference site for this kind of testing, motion handling is solid as well. Fast moving objects stay fairly sharp thanks to the high refresh rate and pixel response. On the back there are two HDMI 2.1 ports and one DisplayPort 1.4, capable of handling a 4K signal at 120 or 165 Hz. This means excellent 2D compatibility with current-gen consoles like PS5 and Xbox Series X. There is also a USB 3.1 Gen 1 hub with two downstream USB-A ports and one USB-B upstream ports to connect the monitor to the PC, which is required to enable the 3D features and the eye tracking. From an aesthetic point of view, I really liked the RGB LEDs on the bottom edge, which project colored light synchronized with what's happening on the screen. In a dark room, the edge lighting visually extends the colors beyond the display, enhancing the atmosphere during gameplay. On the front, beside a silver stand that allows tilt and height adjustment but not rotation, we find the eye tracking cameras and immediately notice how reflective the glass is. I couldn't find any proof that this trick actually helps separate the image from the background in 3D scenes, but I've honestly never seen a modern monitor this glossy. This caused quite a few issues even when using the monitor in 2D. Speaking of 2D, without the 3D features enabled, the G90XF behaves like a normal IPS 4K monitor, vivid colors, more than adequate viewing angles, and excellent smoothness in games at 165Hz with FreeSync or G-Sync. The main compromise due to the 3D technology is that the lenticular layer on top of the display can introduce faint scan lines on high contrast text backgrounds. These are caused by the lenticular layer itself. Because of this reason, for productivity and photo editing, the monitor is acceptable but not ideal. Now that the basics are out of the way, let's talk about a monitor as a 3D display. This is Samsung's first monitor to implement an auto-stereoscopic, what I prefer to call glasses-free. Simply put, the screen can show a different image to each eye, creating a 3D effect similar to VR headsets or 3D glasses, but without wearing anything. This is made possible by a lenticular layer made of many tiny lenses over the subpixel and two front-facing cameras that track your eye position in real time. Thanks to this tracking, the monitor adjusts the angle of the image to keep the 3D effect stable even if you move slightly in front of the screen. The sweet spot, the optimal position where the 3D effect works properly, is fairly wide and comfortable. Samsung recommends sitting at a distance of roughly 70 to 100 centimeters. This is a big improvement over older glasses-free 3D technologies like the underappreciated Nintendo 3DS, which required you to stay perfectly still and became tiring after just a few minutes. Of course, there are still physical limitations. The 3D is designed for a single viewer, which is why it's often called a personal monitor. If multiple people stand in front of it, the effect is lost for anyone who isn't centered. Moving too far off axis or sitting at extreme distance will also degrade the 3D image. It's important to note that to get a real 3D effect, the monitor needs content rendered in stereoscopy, meaning meaning two slightly different viewpoints per eye. Anything that's already side by side works perfectly. Since this is a PC monitor, dedicated drivers and software are required to manage the 3D. The Odyssey 3D Hub acts both as a launcher for supported games and as a control center for the various 3D modes when detected. At launch, native compatibility is limited to around a dozen games. Most of them are demo or indie titles chosen to showcase their 3D capabilities. These include the first Berserker Kazan, co-developed with Samsung and officially certified, as well as Stray, Palworld, Little Nightmares, Silent Hill 2, Hellblade: Senua's Saga and Fist. Samsung has stated that the library will expand with around 11 additional co-developed titles and roughly 50 compatible games in total by the end of the year. When you launch a supported game through the hub, the software automatically activates the monitor's 3D modes and injects stereoscopic rendering into the game. During gameplay, an on-screen overlay allows you to adjust parameters like 3D depth, which controls how strong the depth effect is, pop-out, which determines how much object can come out of the screen towards you, and the ability to toggle 3D on and off instantly. These options can also be assigned to customizable hotkeys. When everything works, and read carefully when it works, the experience is truly impressive. Kazan delivers outstanding 3D quality with elements that literally pop out of the monitor and a strong immersive sense of depth. We are talking about 30 to 40 cm of perceived depth inside the screen. It feels like falling into it. That said, the software is still a bit immature. Sometimes the hub fails to hook into the game and activate 3D, forcing a full PC restart to fix it. Silent Hill, for example, still refuses to launch properly for me. Little Nightmares 2 works cleanly, while Senua's Saga shows some minor artifacts. I expect improvements in compatibility and stability over the coming month, but right now I've gone from moments of extreme frustration to moments of pure joy when a game finally launches correctly. As we will see later, many of the natively compatible titles are Unreal Engine games, which also work with VR mods, but we will get there. Even with the bugs and software issues, the first few minutes in 3D will absolutely blow your mind. The image is clean, bright and extremely high resolution, far beyond what you might expect. Another feature of the Odyssey 3D Hub is a background tool that converts traditional 2D content into 3D, especially video. When the software is running, it detects when an app goes full screen and asks whether the content is standard 2D or already side-by-side 3D. If you select 2D, the AI 3D video conversions kicks in. A machine learning algorithm analyzes the video frames in real time and generates a depth map, turning a flat image into a stereoscopic one by separating foreground and background. In theory, this allows you to watch almost any video, movie or stream in 3D. In practice, the results are not very impressive and not come close to Apple Vision Pro's AI 3D conversion, which is still one of the most interesting features in that headset. Everything changes when the source is true side-by-side content, whether it's an MP4 video, a photo, a YouTube video or even a productivity app. In this mode, the monitor takes a signal with left and right frames placed side by side and displays it in a proper 3D as a single stereoscopic image. This is extremely useful because it allows you to use any content capable of producing side-by-side output, bypassing the need for native support in the Odyssey Hub. I tested several 3D trailers easily found online and the quality is excellent, especially with high bitrate source files. To activate this mode, the content must be full screen and the monitor resolution must be set to 4K. I found this restriction annoying because there are cases where you might not be able to do both, like apps that only run borderless full screen, for example. On top of that, you always have to select the 3D mode via a pop-up menu, which force you to keep the mouse ready and react quickly before the window closes. If you miss it, you'll need to restart or resize the content again to trigger the pop-up. To summarize the native features, Samsung software covers the main use cases for 3D content and a generic side-by-side mode that allows relatively hassle-free viewing of movies and apps. And honestly, the video could end right here, like it does in about 90% of the reviews out there. UEVR, this is what the monitor can do out of the box if you don't want to tinker with mods or patches. But at least in my opinion, the real review begins now. Let's start from the beginning with Nvidia 3D Vision Games, which try to bring 3D gaming to PC, or rather, never really managed to, given the limited adoption. As early as 2007, early demos were already being shown at trade fairs with lot of excitement. Support wasn't bad at all, but when Arkham, Battlefield 3, Dirt 2, Rise of the Tomb Raider and the always mentioned Trine. Unfortunately, in 2019 Nvidia dropped 3D support and driver version 425.31 was the last to include it. This means that for most of you that technology is inaccessible unless you use incredible community tools. 3D Fix Manager lets you revive your 3D ready library, but you need old drivers, Windows 10, the right monitor and glasses, and a GPU not newer than the RTX 2000 series. The 2080 Ti is currently the last natively compatible card. You can see how unrealistic this setup is for almost everyone. Through 3D Fix Manager you can choose which games to patch and what type of patch to apply. Things change when you try to run these games on the Odyssey. A native 3D vision signal simply won't work here due to the underlying technology. 3D Vision render one frame for the left eye and one for the right at 120 Hz, alternating which lens was darkened. That's why it's called Shutter 3D and effectively delivers 60 Hz per eye. This technology is completely incompatible with this monitor, but what we need instead is a side-by-side output, and fortunately many 3D Vision games also support other display modes directly from their launch menus. Trine, Tomb Raider, Batman, all of them had side-by-side options, but not everything worked perfectly on the first try and results varied. To make these games work you likely need wrappers that force stereoscopy. It starts with 3D Migoto, originally used to fix 3D vision issues, which later inspired the Geo11. Geo11 hooks into DirectX 11 games and allows side-by-side output. There is also Geo12 and Geo3D for DirectX 12, often combined with ReShade. For Vulkan games there is VK 3D Vision, developed by Halifax, who has contributed massively to Vulkan 3D support. But all I can say is that when I launched Rise of the Tomb Raider, I literally cried. Beyond being one of my favorite games in terms of Lara and her story, it now looks like a PlayStation 6 game. The sharpness, the depth, the immersion, it's unbelievable. The opening bear scene popping out of the screen and doesn't feel like something from a 10-year-old game. 10 years ago in fact was running poorly on a GTX 690, now in 4K 3D it finally gets the treatment it deserves. Yes, some trees still get in the way sometimes, but when it works it is breathtaking. I'll be quick here because I couldn't test everything, but Trine is another definitely 3D Vision title you should revisit. As we move fast to 3D Vision games, let's talk about more modern titles and how they behave. Death Stranding, Lies of P, Borderlands, The Witcher 3, racing games like Grid Legends, this is where more advanced and tinkering comes into play. UEVR allows many Unreal Engine games to run in VR, while ReShade can do many things, including forcing depth and side-by-side output. Basically with UEVR the game runs in a virtual VR mode, but instead of sending the image to a headset, the double render is redirected to the monitor using tools like XR Game Bridge combined with VR2 3D, a ReShade plugin. This tool tricks the system into thinking that the 3D monitor is a VR or a spatial reality device. I spent hours frustrated, I have to admit, because nothing was working. Getting UEVR or Lucross mods to run is already hard enough. Sometimes I had better luck using ReShade directly with shaders like Super Depth 3D or Ran Depth. These shaders read the game's depth buffer and generate two stereoscopic images by applying horizontal offset based on depth, effectively creating a real-time 3D effect. It is basically 2D to 3D conversion driven by depth data. The quality can't match true geometric stereo rendering since it can't reveal hidden perspectives and you may see distortions at the edges, but with the right filters it can still deliver a convincing sense of depth in many games. ReShade is the most accessible way to expand your 3D library. It's easy to toggle and doesn't require complex setup. That said, it doesn't always work properly and Vulkan games in particular don't seem to like ReShade very much. But still, games like Stellar Blade look incredible in terms of visual clarity, shooting, scene deliver a depth effect I never imagined without a headset or glasses. I strongly recommend disabling the HUD whenever possible as it only distracts from the effect. You need to experiment a bit, but when it works, it is worth it. Let me say a few words about a comparison that might not be fair, but shows my passion for this stuff. I already finished Stellar Blade on PS5, so I had no reason to replay it, and yet I'm doing a full second run using the VR mod. By adjusting scale and shrinking the world, Stellar Blade becomes a living diorama. I finally appreciated the verticality of certain areas, boss fights, and environments that went unnoticed before. Having the world in front of you, with the character moving like a tiny figure, is something truly special, that will never ever be a native VR action platformer done this well, ever. After experiences like this, I'm no longer willing to settle for low-poly indie platformers on standalone headset. Sure, I played it on a Pimax Crystal with an RTX 4090 at 60,000 pixels per eye, and not everyone can do that, but VR in any case is 10 times better than monitors. That said, for people who hate VR, and there is a lot outside, or simply can't stand headsets but still want immersive 3D content, this monitor fits that niche perfectly. The last major group of native 3D products we can bring here comes from the Nintendo 3DS and PlayStation 3 era. Yes, with this monitor you will be able to enjoy in 3D those games. This is the Sony HMZ-T1 released 14 years ago, and now I can finally do justice to my PS3 3D library. And it is a big one. Almost all PS3 first-party titles supported stereoscopic 3D. Uncharted, MotorStorm, God of War, Ratchet & Clank, Super Stardust. The PS3 could even play 3D Blu-ray movies, and those 720p OLED displays were pure high definition for the time. When it works, it is relatively simple. Enable 3D from the game menu, which output side by side, then switch to full screen. You'll probably need to try many times because full screen often prevents you from clicking the 3D pop-up, and sometimes it's easier to force 3D via ReShade, but the experience made me tear up with joy. These games won't be forgotten anymore, and they can now live on without being tied to an old hardware. The price back then didn't help adoption, and we might say the same about this monitor today, which costs around 2000 euro, but just imagine ICO in stereoscopy and you will understand why this matters. Many PS3 games supported 3D: God of War, Chains of Olympus, Super Stardust, Ratchet & Clank, ICO, MotorStorm, the list is endless. Okay, and now let's move on Nintendo 3D content. Just a quick note, I'm not mentioning any specific tools for obvious reasons. The internet is your friend and this content isn't for beginners anyway. The Nintendo 3DS was the highest expression of a portable 3D before devices like MetaQuest, Oculus Go and Gear VR. Games designed specifically for 3D on a dual-screen handheld. How can you not love that? The 3DS used a simple but effective stereoscopic system, a layer with vertical slits in front of the screen acting like shutters to direct images to each eye. Since they were fixed, you had to stay still to keep the effect. The new Nintendo 3DS had that basically something like head tracking, but the limitations were still huge. Still, these games were designed for 3D. Mario Kart 7 is incredibly close to its ultimate VR form. I dream about a Mario Kart VR arcade cabinet at night, and this should tell you everything. It feels like falling into the track at a resolution that the 3DS could never dream of. And please, if in your town there is the Mario Kart VR arcade cabinet, please tell me where is it, because I really want to try it. Returning to the 3DS, there is Star Fox, New Mario, Mario Galaxy, and the final cherry on top, Donkey Kong Country Returns. I haven't tested the whole catalog, but this game was clearly designed with 3D in mind. Enemies, falling pillars and level celebration, they literally pop out of the screen. And the background scrolling levels where DK moves behind the foreground make me believe someone really thought about 3D. Don't tell me this was designed for a 14-inch CRT in a bedroom. I'm pretty sure this game has been designed with 3D in mind. Okay, we finally reached the end. I don't know how many of you made it this far, I don't know how many of you are about to order this monitor, but in the end this is an incredible piece of technology that, if VR didn't exist, would be absolutely essential for me. If VR didn't exist, but VR exists. The Odyssey 3D is a unique product in today's market. It delivers on its promise of bringing stereoscopic 3D back to PC gaming in a modern, refined and more accessible way, for those who don't want glasses, hate headsets or can't wear them. Beyond 3D, it is a good 27-inch 4K 165Hz gaming monitor with all the typical strength and weakness of a high-end EPS panel. Innovation has a price around €2,000, far more than other 27-inch 4K monitors. In short, the 3D feature is the entire reason for the price. It is only worth it if you truly care about 3D. If you are intrigued by the idea of stereoscopic gaming without a headset, if you loved 3D back in 2012 and dropped it because support disappeared, and if you're willing to accept some compromises and tinkering, the Odyssey 3D will reward you with something truly unique. If you don't care about 3D, there are far cheaper EPS monitors or even OLEDs on the market. This is a niche product for enthusiasts who love immersive entertainment but never made a jump to VR.